let's go to Washington now, where the Supreme Court making a key decision yesterday that's going to affect millions of Americans. The justice is ruling against Joe Biden's vaccine mandate and testing mandate for large companies with at least 100 employees. That ruling 6-3, but they did rule 5-4 that healthcare workers still need to be vaccinated. Joining us now to talk more about this is former acting U.S. Attorney General Matthew Whitaker. Mr. Attorney General, great to have you back on. Good to see you. Just want to get your top line thoughts on the ruling yesterday and the constitutionality of what that means for healthcare workers. I was surprised by that. That I thought was a small win for the administration, but really the big one, the big story yesterday, that corporate America will not have to worry about implementing this unconstitutional mandate. Let's get your response, then we'll welcome in the rest of our powerhouse panel.
Well, good morning. My initial take on this is that if you read Gorsuch's concurrence, it kind of lays out really a new brand of federalism, which is Congress cannot delegate these major decisions like trying to vaccinate 84 million people to unelected, nameless, faceless bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. It is really a victory for the people and resets the relationship of all three branches. And I think this is a good thing that, these bureaucracies that have continued to take vague language and expand it broadly that have finally been slapped down on this mandate. So this is a good win for federalism. It's a good win for the people and their ultimate sovereignty, and in a representative republic like we have.
Yeah, and shows just how important those Supreme Court appointments are for any sitting president. Let's welcome in the rest of our powerhouse panel. We've got best-selling author and political analyst Mark Halperin here, the CEO of Chickasaw Bank and Oklahoma Transportation Commissioner T.W. Shannon, and the co-host of Wake Up America Weekend, Allison Maloney. Guys, have at it. Mark, to you first with the former acting attorney general.
General, good morning. I'd love to ask you about that other decision on the healthcare workers where the Chief Justice and one other Trump appointee, Justice Kavanaugh, voted with the majority. What did you make of their involvement in the majority and their justification for the ruling?
Yeah, well, broadly, and good to see you, Mark. I think broadly what I see is that this is the pivot point. Kavanaugh and Roberts, it used to be Roberts was the fifth vote, and now obviously that power has shifted a little bit, and Kavanaugh and Roberts form this kind of centrist bloc. But ultimately, this boils down to if Congress is going to appropriate money and say that the administrative state can attach strings, that's exactly what they did and can do. And so, I think there's a lot of conservatives that think this was an opportunity to also pare back the administrative state. But these are the two justices that you kind of expected would not go all the way like a Neil Gorsuch did, and find a place where the administrative state can pass these types of mandates.
Is it clear now to you that Kavanaugh is more aligned with Roberts, less aligned with Alito, less aligned with Gorsuch, or is it too soon to say?
Good question.
Yeah, I think it's too soon to say, Mark. But I think this was some of our concerns when Kavanaugh was appointed. But it also goes to that if you think about where these people come from. Kavanaugh, Roberts, D.C. centric, spent a lot of time inside the Beltway, and not in real America. And as you know, I'm from Iowa. And it's a different world once you get outside of the Beltway and once you see real America. And so I think this is a little bit of the DC centric attitude towards the people and their sovereignty. But I don't think this is any reason to panic right now. But it is a concern that those two are forming this kind of centrist bloc.
Yes.
General, you bring up such a good point about how getting outside of the Beltway, the world is completely different. I want to elevate the debate a little bit. And first, thank you for being with us as well. When we talk about emergency powers and the limits of emergency powers, we know there are extraordinary powers given by the Constitution to the president during a time of emergency, and certainly a health crisis may qualify as that. But what are the limits of those emergency powers? Because as we look at this pandemic, we're 3 years in. Are we in fact still in an emergency? And if we are, what are the limits of the president's powers there? Because I think that's where the real fear and risk is with this administration.
By the way, that's a great question. I also think that in many respects, yesterday was a victory for democracy. We have checks and balances for a reason. And yesterday that played out before the eyes of America, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, obviously, the Biden administration is trying to do whatever they can to affect this pandemic. But ultimately, the Constitution, which is so thankful to see a mention of the 10th Amendment in this opinion, there are certain powers that are just not available to the executive, no matter how badly they want to, do something. And so this is where, the opinion is very clear in the OSHA rule that you have to, something this important, this big, affecting 84 million people, not just in the workplace, but broadly in their lives, and an irreversible vaccine that you cannot take out of your body, that requires extraordinarily precise language and delegation from Congress. And ultimately, I think if you read the Gorsuch concurrence, which informs the majority opinion, is that power, it cannot be delegated to a nameless, faceless bureaucrat. Congress has to exercise that power, and then the executive has to execute.
Yeah, sir, thank you for joining us today. I was talking earlier about how Jen Psaki, during her press briefing, she said, well, we're going to continue to work with businesses to make sure everyone's safe. It was almost like they were ignoring the ruling. But I do want to pivot to the healthcare workers ruling, because hospitals are already strapped, right? Even before COVID, they didn't have a lot of nurses and doctors, and then COVID hit, and now these vaccine mandates. I just want to get your opinion on that, because a lot of healthcare workers were hoping perhaps they could have their job back if they weren't vaccinated.
Yeah, and this is a really concerning thing, because not only are we going to lose healthcare workers at a time where we need more healthcare workers, but this rule is going to affect all of the facilities that receive Medicare dollars, and that's really every healthcare facility. There's very few that don't receive some government funding from these programs. And, I think it's yet to be seen how ultimately we can support these folks on the front line that we say we support and we thank with our yard signs, but at the same time, we the people, through our elected representatives are, really forcing some of those out that are making an individual choice.
Great point.
General, what about employers, frankly, employees who are working for employers who may want to continue with the mandate, who want to enforce their own mandate? What kind of rights do employees have who actually don't want the vaccine and they don't want their employer telling them they have to take it? What are the rights available to them?
Yeah, well, obviously the first right is a right not to work for a company that doesn't, understand individual, sovereignty on their own body. But that being said, these companies can pass rules for their workforce, and I think it's, I don't think, while the individual mandate was deemed unconstitutional through OSHA and its limited powers to affect the workplace, I don't think that this opinion can be read to really take any power away from an individual employer to determine if they want to have vaccine mandates. But, this is, I think, just another area where we see the fissure in our country, where there's going to be conservative companies and there's going to be liberal companies. And I think it's, we're returning to a kind of a 19th century model of what we saw as a country, instead of this, kind of post-Watergate world. But, ultimately, companies can, to a large extent, set rules for their employees.
Yeah. All right, former Mr. Acting Matthew Whitaker, the former acting attorney general. Thank you so much for playing ball with us this morning. This was such a big moment yesterday. Just quickly, 5 seconds. Was their ruling 5-4? Do you think that that's constitutional when it comes to healthcare workers? I just wanted to get your quick thoughts on that.
Well, this is the challenge that goes all the way back to Marbury versus Madison, which is the Supreme Court says what's constitutional, what's unconstitutional, and it's up to the other two branches to take back some of that power. It
seems sort of arbitrary that it was, they went all the way with one, but then said, no, people that are in hospitals, you have to be fully vaccinated, which also affects a lot of people. And to TW's point earlier, a lot of people that lost their jobs as a result of that. Natural immunity, again, not taken into account. Matthew Whitaker, great having you on this morning. Thank you so much. Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.